Welcome to Blood, Guts, and Booze.
I'm Olivia.
And I'm Kendrah. And this is a comedy podcast here to frighten you and make you question the world that we live in. So sit back with your favorite snacks and let's dive into this. Listener discretion is advised, as these podcasts are not for the faint of heart, nor are they PG. All right, so for today's case, when you think school shooter, what do you think of?
Well, there's been a lot of school shootings recently, and definitely that one girl who hates Mondays. But most of all, the most famous of them all.
Yeah, so most people probably think the same thing that you're thinking, which is Columbine. It's referred in all types of pop culture as an example of the first school shooting or the beginning of them. But was it? The first mass school shooting in the United States was, in my opinion, in Austin, Texas, on August 1st, 1966. 18 were killed and 31 were injured. But guns in schools have coexisted in the U.S. since at least the 1800s. So what makes Columbine such a memorable one? The United States has the highest number of school shooters around the world.
That doesn't surprise me. Because like I said recently in news, that's all you hear lately is school shootings. I mean, up until COVID, but...
Between the 1999 Columbine shooting and the 2012 Sandy Hook shooting, there was 31 school shootings in the U.S. and only 14 in the rest of the world.
Wow.
Yeah. So it feels
Kinda
like...
didn't expect that.
Yeah. It feels like every time that the shock of one settles, another happens. Media plays a huge part in that shock. Without TV and the internet, would we really know what was happening in our world? Perhaps, but not day of or within seconds of that shooter starting fire.
Yep.
Columbine happened right at the beginning of that huge media surge, which plays a big part on why the whole world was so invested into it. JonBenet Ramsey is another great example of this. Her murder happened at the beginning of the media really taking off, so that's how the whole country fell in love with this case of this poor innocent girl. So school shooters have taken inspiration from this over the years. The shootings, bombs, even the trench coats. Some shooters even seem to idolize the shooters.
Well, look at American Horror Story, right? They did some of their first season off of pretty much this.
Yeah. Between 1999 and 2015, more than 40 people were charged with quote-unquote Columbine-style plots. Almost all had studied the Columbine attack.
You guys can't hear it, but I just did an extremely big eye roll.
Yeah.
That people are that invested in like this shooting.
Mm-hmm.
And use it for like inspiration.
Yeah. Now, let's talk about what actually happened on that day, because it's a lot more than just a shooting. They had been planning this day for about a year before they actually did it, and hoped to cause the most deaths in U.S. history was their end goal.
That's some pretty interesting goals to have.
Yeah. So, all right. On April 20th, 1999, Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold arrived at Columbine High School around 11:10 a.m. With them, they had 4 guns, 4 knives, and 99 explosives with them.
Wow, I didn't know it was that much.
Yeah, they placed 2 bombs, 2 duffel bags full of bombs, in the school cafeteria, which failed to detonate.
That's about
Their cars were also designed and failed to detonate, along with 2 more bombs at another location to create a diversion from their plan, and only one of those partially went off. So, clearly not their strong suit.
They really suck.
Yeah. So then, they geared up to go inside. They strapped their weapons under black trench coats and lugged bags filled with pipe bombs, ammunition, and one of the guns, sporting T-shirts that said natural selection and wrath on them. On the way into the school, though, one of the boys ran into another boy who he had recently just patched up a long feud with, and basically told him, I like you, go home. And the guy walked off and was spared that day. So, it makes...
He definitely had an angel on his shoulder that day, for sure. Like, somebody was looking out for that kid.
At 11:19, 9 minutes after they arrived at the school, Dylan threw the first pipe bomb. which only set off smoke. I'm telling you, these two were clearly not expert bomb makers. Okay?
How old are they? What, 17?
I honestly don't remember. That's the one thing I didn't friggin' look up for this thing, is how old these kids were.
But, like, either way, they're in high school, so they're anywhere between 14 and 18, and, yeah, nowhere near being a bomb expert.
So after this smoke, witnesses heard the boys scream, "Go! Go!" And they pulled their guns out from under their coats and began shooting. 2 students were shot, 1 killed, and 1 left paralyzed from the neck down.
Oh, no.
They were sitting on a grassy hill. Then turned fire towards 3 more students, killing 1, injuring the other 2. Then towards 5 students on a hill nearby, injuring 2 again. Dylan walked towards the cafeteria, came up to one of the students he had shot, pleading for help. And he replied, "Sure, I'll help you." Then shot him in the fucking face.
Ooh, execution style. That's...
I think the weirdest part of all of this is half the crap that these kids said during all of it. Honestly.
They have no remorse.
Yeah, so then he rejoined Eric, who had shot someone else. They started walking, throwing pipe bombs in just random directions. A witness heard one of them say, and I quote, "This is what we always wanted to do. This is awesome."
Ugh, goosebumps. That's gross.
Yeah. Patty Nielsen, a teacher, thinking that there was a prank going on, went to go tell the boys to knock it off, but instead had a gun shot at her. She then ran to the library with glass in her face and made students hide under their desks. At 11:24, a nearby deputy got the first call about a shooter at the school. Eric seen him and began shooting, while the deputy shot back, but none of them making a hit. The boys then entered the school, throwing more pipe bombs in random directions, shooting at anyone that they came across or seen, missing almost all of them. 6 more deputies arrived, and at 11:26, so you're thinking here, only 16 minutes in, Harris returned to shooting at them, at the deputies. Shots returned, and again, no fucking hits. So clearly, all of these police officers and deputies arriving, they're not actually getting anything done because they can't get in the school.
Which really sucks, because it's like, there's so many people that probably could have been saved if, you know, they just had the right guy.
Yeah. So I want to touch here that someone who's been declared a hero out of this is a teacher, and his name was Dave Sanders.
Good old Dave.
He evacuated students from the cafeteria. There was hundreds of students in there where those big bombs were supposed to go off, and if they had gone off, they could have killed hundreds of students, but thankfully they didn't.
God damn it, Dave, you're a fucking hero.
He evacuated students from that cafeteria, only to be walking down the hallway, still trying to evacuate more. He was seen by the boys, and when he went to turn and run, he was shot and killed. He wasn't killed instantly, though. Instead, he was dragged into another room. Someone performed first aid on him, trying to stop the bleeding, and he bled out, suffering for over 3 hours.
Oh my goodness.
At 11:29, 19 minutes in, the boys entered the library. They reloaded their weapons and killed a special needs student, shooting him right in the face.
Oh, those sick fucks.
They started yelling, "Yahoo!" after shooting everybody. And yet another no-hit shootout with the police happened from the library windows. The boys then began walking the rows and shooting at students hiding under the desk. They were taunting them, just having the best time of their lives throughout all of this. You know? Eric even said, "Peekaboo," before kneeling down and knocking on the one desk to shoot a girl in the face.
Oh my god.
10 students died in the library, and 12 were injured. They continued to taunt the students, shooting under random desks until 11:36, so 26 minutes in. They started 2 fires, that were quickly put out. One of them was in a supply closet, and a teacher that was hiding basically inside of it. They put it out. The other fire they started was in the cafeteria because they were trying their hardest to get those bombs to go off, and the sprinkler system kicked in.
Well, when you're also a premature person, you're not going to be able to do things like that. They're just...
So around noon, 50 minutes in, the two boys re-entered the now empty library except for the deceased and two of the injured because one was paralyzed and one hadn't moved. Eric Harris sat down with his back to a bookshelf and fired a gun through the roof of his mouth. Dylan Klebold went down on his knees and shot himself through his temple. Less than an hour, and these two boys changed schools in America forever.
First off, they're little bitches for shooting themselves. You should face the consequences if you're going to do something like that.
Especially since they seemed so proud of the entire thing.
Yeah, you'd think they'd want to live on and be all like, that's right. That's right. I did that school shooting in prison. You know what I mean? Like, just try and hype it up that they're top dog.
I think the worst part of this whole thing, too, is that because, it's great now that places like the States have all of these different drills and laws now because of things like Columbine happening and Sandy Hook and all of that. So then they're prepared for it.
Yeah,
But back then, they weren't expecting or prepared for this. They had a body left outside of this school for over 24 hours, just sitting there. Because it took them, until that night pretty much to get into the school because they weren't prepared. And, it's great, but it's sad at the same time to think that this is what it took to prepare people. And because this is what it took to prepare people, it's also the same thing that's inspiring others to do it.
Well, I remember in, public and high school, we used to have to do drills like this, too. And, we're here in Canada.
Code Black.
Yeah, we're here in Canada. And I remember having to hide under the desks or in a specific spot at the corner with the lights off, and they would have... I believe the sheriff and fire marshal along with the principal walking up and down the halls, rattling the doors and banging on them because they wanted to make sure that you would stay quiet and, follow exactly what you're supposed to do in those situations. Because, I don't have kids yet. I know you do, but I could not imagine my child going
I'm
through
terrified.
that.
I'm terrified.
That... It's so scary.
I love true crime, and, it's great that I have all of this knowledge, but at the same time it terrifies me that these are the kind of things that I'm sending a kid into the world. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, I feel like it slightly prepares me mentally, knowing I'm not naive about the world that we live in. But now you know how
fucked up the world is and how to prepare her.
And, these two boys, and like most other parents of school shooters, there was, quote-unquote, no signs. They were a nice boy. I don't know why he did this. He was just a little depressed. Which brings the issue, too, of mental health. Mm-hmm. We got to pay more attention to our kids. If our kids are being isolated, they're staying in their room, they're writing in journals nonstop, and
get them outside.
They're being
try and
disturbing.
Talk to them. Try and get help for them.
Figure out what's wrong with your fucking kid. And
there's lots of ways and routes and help that you can get to prevent things like this.
Can we hold the parents accountable for these shootings?
Partially, I would say. Partially you should, because...
Not in a court of law, but at the same time we have to question it.
Mm-hmm.
And be like, well,
nature versus nurture and all that kind of stuff. And
yeah, I feel like if my child was suddenly isolating herself and wearing all these dark clothes, not to say that dressing a certain way is always...
As I'm sitting here in black.
Yeah. Yeah. It's I mean, I went through the emo phase in high school. We all go through that phase of, I'm sad, it's cool, whatever. But, you know, if it's to this point where, you know, they've completely isolated themselves, it's only one other boy, you know, one other kid, or just themselves, you know, don't be afraid to ask them questions. You know, your kid might hate you for doing it. I mean, 16, we all hate our mom. But, you know, I'd never let myself live if I hadn't constantly pushed and questioned. But some of them are just like, well, you know, they were just, you know, alone or whatever. We just let them do their own thing. You know, don't do it. Because they're going to fucking do this kind of thing.
Well, it's exactly why I said, like, nature versus nurture, right? Mm-hmm. Like, I think that also has a lot to do with it, which is why I think parents should be slightly accountable for specific actions of certain actions, right? Like, school shootings, yes, 1,000%, the parent, like you said, not in court, but, like, the parent should still be accountable and, like...
But should there be some sort of law that, or charge that, you know, of negligence or something?
1,000% there should be, like, a negligence or, like, even some sort of, like, a child abuse
child
kind of thing.
Endangerment,
like,
or child neglect for not noticing that your kid...
And not getting your child help and not... Because, like, what if they did have undisclosed, like, mental illness that you couldn't, like, that you didn't know, and or if you did, and you don't inform people of that, they could be, like, now they're an endangerment to other people, which is exactly why shit like this would happen, because I can tell you right now, no physically, normally sane person would do something like this. Like, there has to be some underlying medical reasons why they thought this was a good idea. And I mean, like, it sucks too, because, like, not to shit on the states, but kind of shitting on them. Like, it's so easy for children to get guns and stuff. Like, I saw a video once of this 12-year-old kid that walked into a gun shop, got a gun, but he wasn't able to get liquor or a lottery ticket. It's like, how?
Well, that's the thing that I was going to touch on next, too, is, you know, the weapons that these boys had, okay? Listen to it. If you're any sort of person who knows guns, they had an Intratec Tech 9 Mini, a High Point 995 carbine, a Savage 67H pump-action shotgun, and a Stevens 311D double-barreled sawed-off shotgun. How does a child, because in my opinion, if you're under 18, you're a child.
How
does a child obtain 4 guns like this? And 4 knives, and how do you not notice your child's, or children's, whatever, making 99 explosives?
Yeah.
It's not like they just made one pipe bomb secretly in their basement. They made 99 of these fucking things.
Like, what do you need all those batteries for, son?
Yeah, and
we're
like,
just doing a science project, Mom. Like,
with this, you know, there's 15 deaths and 24 that were injured in all of this. 2 of them were injured trying to escape. You know, they weren't injured by these 2 boys. But they were still technically injured by these boys, you know? And it's...
Not physically, but definitely mentally.
Yeah, so
like,
all of them.
You're traumatized now. Like, imagine being those kids in that school. Like, I would never be the same after that.
Yeah, there's been cases, too, of, you know, teachers and students that survived things like Columbine, and years later they're drug addicts. They commit suicide because
it's the PTSD.
Because they can't handle this, you know? Which, you know, I don't know if I could have it. And the thing is, too, at the end of the day, when you're talking motive for these 2 boys, it's inconclusive. They still don't have a definitive motive as to why they did it.
Well, and it's not like they left a note or anything that would explain why.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I don't know the full background, but if these kids were bullied, I mean, not saying what they did was right, but I mean, at least go after your bullies if you're gonna go big or go home. You know what I mean? Like, if you're in that situation, not endorsing school shootings, but I mean, like, if you're gonna be vengeful, especially if they were bullied, I wouldn't go for every person possible. I mean, I guess that could be smart on their end, too, because now it's like, making it look like it wasn't obvious they were directed the killing for a specific person or group of people.
Yeah, I mean, they also had signs, like, if you actually paid attention to the kids that were on their computers. Because Eric Harris, he had created a private website, and he was on it, and he blogged and did all that stuff. And it started, half innocent as just an angry kind of teenager with mischief, fireworks, sneaking out of his house. And then,
we've all been there.
By 97, it was turning into anger against society, So that's 2 years before this, and they started planning it a year before. So you had a whole year before the plan to pay attention and maybe possibly catch and do this. And by the end of 97 is when he was posting instructions on how to make bombs,
Which is pretty fucked up for a high school student,
in one part of his blog it says, I'm going to quote here, "All I want to do is kill and injure as many of you as I can, especially a few people like Brooks Brown, a classmate of his." And,
So it pretty much was bullying, and they were targeting people, and then just others to make it.
And that was August 97. That was still, think about it. That was still almost 2 years before they shot up their school. He's talking about killing people, So I'm kind of retracting what I said earlier about, how there was no signs, but there was signs.
They might have been small, but there were still signs.
But there was enough, that you could have really, really noticed. And they had their friggin' journals, too, They were released to the public in 2006, and in it, they eventually documented their arsenal and plan of attack, and, They also wrote things about it about the attack, and they wrote about possibly escaping to a foreign country afterwards or hijacking an aircraft, but ultimately they decided on suicide. But they had plans, all kinds of different plans for this thing. And, they've been writing it since early as 97, And Klebold had been writing down his thoughts since March. And he mentioned going on a killing spree by November of 97. That's
so fucked up.
Not many months.
Yeah. Less than a year, that's...
And they did creative writing projects for schools talking about, killing students in school. So the teachers could have noticed things, too.
The teachers 1,000% should have said something. At least notified the parents, maybe you should look into getting your child some help. This is exactly what they're expressing during school, and which is nowhere near appropriate for any school. The
school also lent them videotapes, recording things. And they made 5 tapes. 3 of them are recordings of them detailing this massacre. There was, so much to know. And because of all of this, and all of these missed signs, and all of this because, back then it wasn't as big of a thing. Nowadays, if you had every single of these things that I've named, you'd be like, this kid's going to shoot up a school, we're shutting lockdowns, we're putting this kid into mental health, we're getting him help, we're separating him from the other toxic person. There would be so much done. But back then it was we didn't have as many resources or whatever to do it all,
Yeah, it's definitely, mental health is a lot more aware now. There's more hotlines and, just therapists in general, doctors, programs, anything that can help anybody with any mental illness. And, if you guys notice anybody that's having, it doesn't matter what age, any sort of mental cognitive ability, whether, it's depression or worse,
Bipolar.
Get them some help, get them some help, it's, people need help, shouldn't let somebody go through something like this, because then you have well more than one life being lost at this point. And, like, I mean, we might be in Canada, and there's a lot of mental health awareness here, and we might not have
Bell Let's
a
Talk.
lot of... Yeah, Bell Let's Talk Day was just in January, wasn't it? January?
Yeah.
You know, in Canada, like, we try to be very big advocates for mental health, I think. I mean, not everywhere is perfect.
And I mean, where we live, it's like the area kind of that we live in, suicide is very, very big in our area.
Yeah, I mean, especially during COVID, it's, you know, it's not easy being locked in your house all the time.
But, like, if
not going out, but, like, that does not mean you should just go and shoot people up, because...
If you think that someone even has the smallest inkling of showing a sign of hurting people like this, call somebody.
Mm-hmm.
You know, call the cops for a mental health check. Call the hospital. Talk to your local mental health place. You know, see what's up, what you can do. Because, you know, this entire thing started in history of school shooters and inspiration for them, but if all of these other people had help, they wouldn't need or want or whatever the inspiration of something like this. You know, a mentally stable person would not go, you know what, I feel like doing today? I'm gonna idolize this Columbine guy and be like, you know what, I'm gonna shoot up my school. A mentally sane person does not do that.
No, they definitely don't.
But anyways, that's going to be it for today's episode.
Yeah, and just one last quick thing, you know, if you guys notice any friends, family with mental illness or any signs of them and they seem to be spiraling, or just yourself, please call. We're in Canada, and I'm going to give the Canadian Mental Health Service number, which is 1-866-377-0385. It doesn't matter what country you're in. Please, you know, get help so we don't have to keep seeing stuff like this, more people being hurt, especially kids. You know, kids are the future. You don't want to... I
feel like kids dying is, like, harder than adults dying. It's just harder for us to process.
1,000%. It is, like, they're so young, they have such bright futures, long life, you know. A school shoot-in shouldn't be what stops them from having a life, right?
Mm-hmm. But anyways, there's my my horrific topic of the day. I'm sure it was sad for some of you to hear it, but, you know, I feel like it was the story that needed to be told to really create the beginning of the theme I'm kind of going here of the terrible world that we live in. And, you know, all of the monsters that are really just the kid next door.
Like Scooby-Doo shows us, right? It's just a man in a mask, right?
Yeah. That boy next door might just not be that boy next door anymore.
Or that girl, or they, he, she, it. Yeah. We don't gender on this show, we don't.
Well, I was saying boy, because, you know, these two are boys. But anyways, thank you all for listening. And
we'll see you guys next week. Yeah.
But toodaloo.
Bye-bye. Special thanks to Dylan Sears for the theme song and Sally Gunter for the cover art. Support us on Patreon and like, share, rate, and subscribe to us on all of our social media pages and your podcast streaming service. Do you have any personal stories or suggestions for the show? Email us at bloodgutsandbooze@gmail.com.